Dames en heren, van harte welkom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Mag ik u vragen recht te staan voor de binnenkomst van de Togati? All rise please for the entrance of the professors. Gaan we het door jullie heen? Ja. Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, professors, a very warm welcome to all of you. Het is feest vandaag. Today is one big celebration. En met recht en reden. De KU Leuven kent elk jaar het doctoraat honoris causa toe. De belangrijkste onderscheiding die wordt uitgereikt in de academische wereld. En dat is dus precies de reden waarom wij vandaag samenkomen. Om 4 bijzondere persoonlijkheden te eren voor hun uitzonderlijke prestaties en bijzondere verdiensten binnen hun vakgebied. That is exactly the reason why we are gathered here today. We will honor 4 unique personalities for their outstanding work and exceptional achievements within their professional domain. Als hoofd van de KU Leuven is er niemand beter geplaatst dan hij om u en onze 4 voorname gasten welkom te heten. Dames en heren, rector Luc Sels.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, benefactors of our university, ladies and gentlemen, students, ladies and gentlemen, cher recteur Blondel, cher Vincent, dear rector Aert, it's my great honor to welcome you to our Patron Saint Day. I especially welcome our guests from abroad, our staff and students. I also welcome our benefactors, very important. I would like to thank them wholeheartedly for how they help make a difference in our research and our teaching. And I particularly welcome, of course, the most important, our honorary doctors, who are the center of attention today. Today is indeed a celebration, and for good reason. It's a tribute to people who embody in an excellent way what our university works for every day. Something you might simply call our values. Today's 4 honorees will also become friends of KU Leuven, members of the family, very important, members of our family. Our celebration today is related to the patron saint of KU Leuven, the Virgin Mary. So our Patron Saint's Day is also about a mother, the Sedes Sapientiae, the seed of wisdom, holding her son on her lap, both of them divinely inspired, transcending human boundaries. I'm not giving this background information for theological reasons. I'm just keen to point out that our Patron Saints Day has important ties with tradition, with the highest forms of meaning-making, with people accomplishing superhuman feats. In fact, all of you do this on a daily basis. It is, after all, the nature of our academic work. We do academic work because it's a good thing to do. We teach, we conduct research, we engage in society because that's a good thing. Our university, or rather all universities, contribute to a better world through their core activities. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about divine inspiration, meaning-making, the highest forms of good, all in one paragraph, that's becoming a little heavy-handed. Indeed, universities strive for the sublime of the academic Olympus, but they have to remain down to earth as well. We teach because that's a good thing, but also because we want to be able to award useful diplomas. We conduct research to gain knowledge for its own sake, but also to do something about the problems our world is currently facing. And we are a university that is open to everyone, but at the same time, we energetically aim for the highest and the best, for the top of Mount Olympus, home to the greatest. So we have quite a few contradictions to grapple with, between high and low, between practice and theory, between democracy and elitism. These contradictions are key to our very existence. A university that only lives in its ivory tower runs the risk of shriveling up. But a university that only works for the needs of the day runs out of air. Instead, we as a university, we prefer to explore the boundaries and the tensions. We love what goes on near those boundaries. For instance, at the interface between two or more disciplines. Our honorary doctors don't live in the ivory tower either, nor do they belong to the hustle and bustle of everyday life. They reconcile both worlds. They push back frontiers, venture into uncharted territory, actively look for inspiration, sometimes in very unexpected places. This tension is what makes their work unique and valuable. Just wait until you hear the enthusiasm of our students and faculty when they talk about the exceptional merits of the honorary doctors they nominated. Ladies and gentlemen, our university has been awarding, for your information, honorary doctorates since 1881. And of course, lesser gods may occasionally have worn the Leuven epitoga, but they were the exception to the rule. Our Hall of Fame primarily includes famous figures. Quite a few heads of state, government leaders, from Churchill to Merkel and Vestager, Secretary Generals of the United Nations, writers from Vargas Llosa to Umberto Eco, social trailblazers, including Mohamed Yunus and Sister Jeanne de Vos, and of course, many dozens of world-famous researchers and scientists, including Nobel Prize winners such as Pasteur and Fleming. It makes perfect sense to add today's 4 honorees to that list. They have pushed back frontiers also, accomplished the impossible. And they have done so in the manner that KU Leuven holds dear. In a moment, the achievements of Professor Alim Louis Benabit will be presented by our colleagues Bart Nutin and Johan van Loon. They will talk about Professor Benabit's work at the interface between medicine and physics or between neurology and engineering. His breakthrough in the area of deep brain stimulation has significantly increased the quality of life of many tens of thousands of people, patients with Parkinson's disease. Professor Benabit has now reached retirement age. Congratulations for that. But that doesn't prevent him from still being very active in the field of neurology. He continues to combine his research also with helping countless patients. Professor Thomas Ebbesen has explored the interactions between light and matter, opening up new horizons to the extent that a very fundamental law of physics had to be dismissed. His work is of the utmost theoretical importance, but will also have applications in the most unexpected areas, from optics to information technology. With a knack for serendipity, he discovered extraordinary optical transmission, among other things. His discovery has already brought him a long list of awards, and today he can add the KU Leuven honorary doctorate to that list. Colleagues Johan Hofkens and Maarten Roefaerts will explain why this recognition is so well deserved. Sister Rosemary Nierumbe. Sister Rosemary does her work where good and evil meet, in the harsh reality of Central Africa, where child soldiers are perpetrators as much as they are victims. Hundreds of girls and women, many of them former child soldiers, are now in her care. Most of them have nowhere else to go and have no future. So a future is what Sister Rosemary gives them. Most famous is the Sowing Hope Foundation, where she teaches her girls the skills they need to become independent. As director of the St. Monica Girls Tailoring Center, she gives a voice, a face, and, most importantly, dignity. Sister Rosemary illustrates how we can put our expertise to the service of society with particular consideration for its most vulnerable members. I don't know if you have noticed, all KU Leuven faculty will have noticed, but this last sentence is a direct quote from the mission statement of this university. We are very proud to have Sister Rosemary here, also very proud that she was nominated by our student representatives. Last but not least, Martin Wolf, our fourth honorary doctor. He could be considered a journalist, although that is somewhat of an understatement. I think it's more correct to call him one of the most important intellectuals of our time. Someone who, at the interface between science, economics, and politics, examines what can and cannot help our society to thrive. He's one of the most influential voices in the world of economic opinion making. His columns in the Financial Times are eagerly read by those who rule the world. He doesn't limit himself to economic analysis, although these are always sharp and highly appreciated by his readers. His analysis gains further relevance because of his erudition, his integrity, and rationality, which he uses to analyze the position of economics in society, not the other way around. Ladies and gentlemen, you will have understood by now that our honorary doctors deserve more than the few words I've just spoken about their work. Therefore, I would like to give the floor now to the nominators, starting with Bart Nutin and Johan van Loon, who will be presenting the work of Alim Louis Benabit. Thank you.
Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. En 1942, à la Tronche, Halim Louis est né. La Tronche, ça fait partie de Grenoble, en France. Mais sa mère était une infirmière, son père un médecin, et ils ont vécu la plupart du temps de son enfance en Algérie, le nord d'Algérie. Mais à ce moment-là, il y avait la guerre d'Algérie. Et c'est devenu un peu dangereux. Et puis, Halim Louis, qui avait 14 ans, avec un de ses frères, est retourné à Grenoble. And there, he started to study medicine some years later. But he met a formidable, fantastic lady who studied pharmacy and biology and had a PhD. She was a researcher, and this is Mrs. Yvette Benavit, who is here with us today. So after his studies in medicine, he went on to be trained in neurosurgery. And after that, he did a PhD, not in medicine, but in physics. Then he became professor of medicine, and some years later, professor in biophysics. So he knew medicine and physics, and that was a major advantage in his future career. Then he was nominated to become the chair of neurosurgery in Grenoble, but some people said this is the end of neurosurgery in Grenoble. But history clearly has shown the opposite, because Grenoble became the mecca of deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease and essential tremor. So in 1987 and the years thereafter, Professor Dr. Halim Benabit and his team, he had an excellent team, they published on electrical stimulation of a certain nucleus in the thalamus and the effects of that on tremor. Tremor in patients with essential tremor, where tremor is the main symptom, but also tremor in patients with Parkinson's disease. That special nucleus, that's the VIM nucleus, ventral intermediate nucleus of the thalamus. So what he did, he was the surgeon, and so he made a burr hole, this is in patients, and then he brought an electrode inside the brain to the VIM, and this electrode was connected to a stimulator, a pacemaker, but not for the heart, but for neurons. And then, when the stimulator was on, the tremor was gone. When the stimulator was off, the tremor reappeared. But Parkinson's disease is more than only tremor. However, he and his team, they went on, and they did not stay with the VIM nucleus. They went to another nucleus, the subthalamic nucleus. Subthalamic, it means it's just a bit deeper in the brain, below the VIM. And so they did the same, implant the electrode and connect it with the stimulator. And when I, for the first time, heard what they did, I saw a video presented by Ben. This is how we call Professor Benabit, his friends call Professor Benabit Ben, and his neurologist with whom he collaborated a lot, Pierre Pollack. So they presented the first patient, and so the patient was sitting. I have no chair, I cannot show it, but the patient could not stand up. And when the patient was, after a while, standing up, the patient could not initiate a movement, could not walk. But when the stimulator was on, the patient could walk, the patient could sit, stand, and could even dance, and the tremor was gone. So I was really, and not only me, I was really amazed. So many people, many neurosurgeons, neurologists went to Grenoble. Grenoble was the Mecca, I told you, to see how it was done. He was the first to do that in humans, he and his team. But I must say that this research was already performed in animals by others. However, what he and his team did was very excellent science to show what the mechanism was underlying this deep brain stimulation. So after all this, he did much more, but there's not enough time to tell this. Then he retired. So, and then you think it's finished. However, preparing his retirement, he has been thinking and finding finances. Mr. Rector, lots of finances. And so he created a totally new institute. And it's called Clinatech. You know IMEC? Eh? Most people know IMEC here. Eh? So it's something like that. I mean, with nanotechnology and microtechnology, and you have biologists, and you have mathematicians and engineers, and you name it. They collaborate, and there are rooms where you can operate rats, but also monkeys. There is even an operating room for humans, for patients, and 5 rooms where they can sleep with the highest technology. This is a fantastic research center. And one of the ideas of Professor Benabid was, you know, when you have a spinal cord injury at the level of the neck, then you can be paralyzed. Eh? You cannot move your arms, you cannot move your legs. And so he thought of making an exoskeleton, so which is a skeleton around the patient, but it is steered by information coming from the brain, from the motor cortex. So the patient thinks consciously or unconsciously and can move. This was, of course, first tested in concept in rats and then in monkeys, but already a bit more than 7 months ago, the first patient was implanted. There is still a problem, I must say, with the equilibrium, but those people who were there at the lecture yesterday have understood that Professor Benabid has already a solution to cope with that equilibrium in the future for patients. One other thing that I do want to mention, because I think it's so important, is his research on animals with near-infrared light. So what he has shown in animals is incredible for Parkinson's patients, because for the first time now you can see that cells that normally degenerate, and they produce the symptoms, and they are the cause of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, that they now don't degenerate. So they are waiting for the first implant in humans. But Professor Benabid, you have seen it yesterday during his talk, those that were there, is a fantastic teacher. He is really an example to young researchers and clinicians. His research has influenced the large field of movement disorders, but also epilepsy, brain tumors, robotics. He made a robot for neurosurgery, brain-computer interfaces. But, Mr. Rector, if you understand that it would have been possible to give an honorary doctorate because of the things that he discovered and did before he retired, because that had as a consequence that 150,000 people received an implant like Professor Benabid developed. However, I consider personally that the developments he is doing at this moment, there's only one patient coming out of this at this moment, but it is ready to go for many more patients. I think that is a much more important discovery than the things he did before his retirement. So you understand that society has already awarded him many times. Just some examples: the Lasker Award, the Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences. He already got 4 times an honorary doctorate from different universities. But voor al deze redenen, meneer de rector, verzoeken professor Johan van Loon en ikzelf u om het eredoctoraat op voorspraak van de Academische Raad toe te kennen aan professor Dr. Alim Louis Benabid. Dank u.
Professor Alim Louis Benabit, KU Leuven is honoring you. KU Leuven is honoring you for your vast scientific work in the field of electrical brain stimulation to treat patients with movement disorders. For your continuing efforts to teach others how to bring this therapy to severely suffering patients worldwide. For being a role model for young clinicians and scientists, showing them how basic science is translated to the clinic. For these reasons, in my capacity as rector of KU Leuven and on the recommendation of the Academic Council, I hereby bestow upon you the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa of this university. My congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Rector. Thank you, dear professors, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. As you may imagine and as you can hear, it is a very intense emotion that I feel being here, receiving the insignia of the honorary doctorate of KU Leuven, the famous university. This is for me a huge honor, which covers and become a cap for my career, mostly in neurosciences, as you heard. We neurosurgeons have the privilege to face this marvelous organ, which is the brain, and for good reasons. We have to explore it, to try to understand the mysteries of it, the function of it, and also the dysfunctions which may happen leading to diseases affecting patients. And the fact that we can obtain some results which may be helpful for some patients. The best immediate reward is seeing the joys, the happiness in our patients with whom we quite often establish very privileged and strong links. And in the meantime, during all this long travel, which is the life, including professional life and retirement, post-retirement life, we have the opportunity to meet a large number of wonderful people, of colleagues, who are each of them beautiful minds. We have the opportunity to travel in different beautiful cities, travel around the world, just discover the difficulties and the beauties of this work and of this world. And receiving, at the end of that, a diploma like your honorary doctorate is part of the treasury of my life. And for this, I want to thank you very much.
To the physicists who called it impossible at first, extraordinary optical transmission made perfect sense after they'd read the paper. Scientific knowledge is never complete. It's instantly growing, constantly growing. That's the great thing about being a scientist, the joy of learning all the time. Zo vat professor Thomas Ebbison zijn ontdekking en werk als wetenschapper samen. In 1989 ontdekte hij in het NEC in Japan als bij toeval dat licht onder bepaalde omstandigheden bijzonder efficiënt door nanogaatjes in metaalfilms kan gestuurd worden, waardoor deze doorschijnend worden. 9 jaar later kende de Noorse fysisch-chemicus een grote doorbraak toen hij samen met een collega in Princeton definitief en onomstotelijk het fenomeen van de buitengewone optische transmissie kon verklaren. His discovery is currently being applied in chemistry, optical electronics, and computer processing. Professor Ebbison is without any doubt a leading expert. After winning the Kavli Prize in Nanoscience in 2014, the most important award in the field of nanosciences, the KU Leuven will honor him by awarding him the title of Doctor Honoris Causa. Professoren en tevens promotoren Johan Hofkens en Maarten Roefaars zullen op gepaste wijze de loftrompet bovenhalen en ons laten kennismaken met professor Thomas Ebbison en zijn werk.
Honorable Rector, Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. Like all sciences, nanoscience brings a wealth of information to our society which can be used to improve our lives. Professor Ebbison is without doubt one of the most influential researchers in the field of nanoscience. More specific, he has been working at the interface of nanoscience and light, a field that is also referred to as plasmonics. This sentence makes most sense to people working in this field. To normal people, the enormous impact of the work of Professor Ebbison might not be obvious at first. And yet, plasmonics has and will continue to have a strong impact on our lives. But let's first take a step back and answer the question, what is nanoscience? Nanoscience is the study of structures and materials on the nanometer scale. Just to give you an idea of how small a nanometer is, a human hair is approximately 100,000 nanometers wide. Nanostructures, of course, existed and exist in nature long before scientists started to study them in their laboratories. A single strand of DNA, for example, the building block of all life, is about 3 nanometers wide. The scales on a morpho butterfly contain nanoscale structures that interact with light and that give the wings the typical brilliant metallic blue and green hues. Because nanostructures are so small, we need specialized methods to fabricate them. Scientists use beams of electrons or ions to create these nanometer-sized features in all kinds of materials, ranging from metals over silicon to carbon. The discovery for which we want to honor Professor Ebbison today actually ties in with this last sentence. And his discovery was a result of serendipity. And this laudatio is also a call to leave room for serendipity and blue sky research in science. So, after Professor Ebbison has read a paper on cavity quantum electrodynamics, rather than doing chemistry in the typical glass vials that chemists and photochemists use, he wanted to do chemistry in small nanometer-sized holes. At that time, Professor Ebbison was working at NAC in Japan, and he was talking to a colleague on how to create these nanometer-sized holes with the nanofabrication tools that were at that moment still in their infancy. When he asked his Japanese colleague to create him a centimeter square gold film with 100 million of identical holes, the answer of his colleague got lost in translation. Maybe yes is a very polite way in Japan to say no way. However, Thomas took this answer at face value, and a few months later, his colleague delivered him this 1 centimeter metal film with all these holes. And much to his surprise, and to anybody that is working in the field of optics, he could see through this film as if it was made out of tainted glass, so he could see through a metal film. At first, experts in the field were very skeptical about this discovery. The standard and well-established laws of physics and optics could not explain how light, with a wavelength of a few hundred nanometers, could be transmitted through holes that are just a few nanometers wide. And I think the problem of having to squeeze through a small space is one that can be best demonstrated with this little movie. Imagine the light has the dimensions of the stick the dog is carrying, and the dimensions of the hole are determined by the 2 posts. You see that you cannot squeeze that stick through these 2 holes. Now, a different breed of dogs that's a little bit smarter solves the problem immediately, but unfortunately for Thomas, unlike a stick, light cannot be broken. So it took Professor Ebbison almost 8 years to explain the underlying physics of the phenomena that is now known as extraordinary optical transmission. And the key to the explanation is the fact that electrons in metals are mobile. Very much the reason why a copper wire, for example, conducts electricity. And when light, which is an electromagnetic wave, hits a metal surface, it creates waves of electrons, which are known as surface plasmons. These waves of electrons, rather, similar like waves breaking on the beach, pile up at these holes, as shown in this animation, and at a certain moment, tunnel through the hole. And if you wonder what tunneling is the phenomena whereby instantaneously something is translocated through a solid object. You know this from movies, where science fiction movies, where people can translocate from one room to the other. Now, of course, in the macroscopic world, this is science fiction. In the quantum world, electrons do this very frequently. And once they translocate through this metal film, they form a new surface wave at the other side of the film, which escapes as light into free space again. You might be wondering why this observation is such a big deal. Well, it's very simple. It's possible now, this realization makes it possible to change properties of light just by making them interact with nanostructures. Strictly speaking, Thomas Ebbison is not the founding father of this field that is referred to as plasmonics. For example, church windows and the famous Lycurgus cup are very early applications of the field, and they rely on changed light properties by interacting with nanometer-sized metal particles. But Ebbison's discovery has revitalized and revolutionized this research field. His findings have already profoundly impacted our lives, with applications ranging from improved medical sensing over fast clocking of CPUs in PlayStation by equipping the chips with a nanostructured metal film, and probably also in future it will lead to faster and greener internet. So internet, as it currently exists, is not green at all. When you do a Google search, a lot of energy is consumed. Now, if we can replace electricity or electronics by optics and plasmonic signals as information carriers, we not only will have faster telecommunication, but also much more energy efficient communication. The contributions of Professor Ebbesen to the field of nanoscience go beyond his contributions to the discovery of extraordinary optical transmission. Together with Aya Jan, now professor in Rice University, he found a way to produce nanotubes. That's another nanomaterial, one of the many carbon allotropes, which is now mass-produced in ton quantities and used heavily in composite materials, for example, in tennis rackets, just to name one application. Moreover, and inspired by that same paper that led him to do chemistry in these nanoholes, he embarked recently in a field of research that is called strong light-matter interaction. So by placing molecules in a cavity, which is nothing else than the tiny space of closely spaced mirrors, he can fundamentally change their properties, such as reactivity or charge transport, by harnessing what is called the vacuum's electromagnetic field fluctuations. Now, this might sound as voodoo science, but Maarten and I predict that this research line will have a similar impact as the extraordinary optical transmission discovery. So, Thomas, I hope that soon you will be able to place a single molecule in a cavity, dress it up with a vacuum field, and disguise it as an ensemble. And then the long list of awards you have already received will become even longer. Om al deze redenen, meneer de rector, verzoek ik u op voordracht van de Academische Raad het eredoctoraat van de KU Leuven te verlenen aan professor Thomas Ebbesen.
Professor Thomas Ebbesen, KU Leuven is honoring you for your inspiring role as a pioneer of original ideas at the interface of different disciplines, opening up new avenues of research in the field of light-matter interactions. For your transformative contribution to the field of nano-optics, breaking with existing theories by showing extraordinary light transmission through sub-wavelength apertures. For the example and the inspiration that you are for young investigators in the pursuit of their ideas and for stimulating curiosity-driven research. For translating your fundamental discoveries into new perspectives for innovation. For these reasons, in my capacity as rector of KU Leuven and on the recommendation of the Academic Council, I hereby bestow upon you the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa of this university. My congratulations.
Their rector, their colleagues, their friends, their Johan and Martens, ladies and gentlemen, it's a deep honor to have been a recipient of this that was bestowed on me. I'm deeply honored and I'm moved by the honor that was bestowed on me today. I'm unlike I'm just too moved. I'm going to go back a little bit. I thought of many things to say. So, the university, obviously, this is ever more so because KU Leuven is one of the great academic institutions in this world and have been a center of excellence for nearly 600 years. I'm also honored by the fact that I joined a list of outstanding recipients, including my 3 colleagues here, whom I admire greatly. Unlike my colleagues here today, whose research has immediate impact on the lives in our society, a great positive impact, my work is a tiny contribution, and both literally and figuratively, as you could hear from the presentation, to the body of knowledge, or the sphere of knowledge of our modern world. I hope that it will lead to all the promising things that Johan just described. Still a long way to go. I've benefited enormously from working in environments where curiosity-driven research, blue sky research, was encouraged. This is something, unfortunately, today has a lot of places have a lot of political policies, government policies have not encouraged as much as they used to. I've also benefited from outstanding colleagues during my career and the support of my wife. Thank you.
Dankjewel, Aram van Ballaert, voor de heerlijke en feestelijke muzikale omlijsting vandaag. Hij is overigens docent aan het u ongetwijfeld welbekende Lemmens Instituut hier in Leuven. Tijd nu voor de vrouw in ons selecte clubje van vandaag. En wat voor een vrouw. What an extraordinary woman she is. She truly touches your heart. But speaking from my own experience, I had goosebumps just by meeting her earlier today. Sinds 2001 heeft ze zich grenzeloos ingezet voor de opvang, het onderwijs en het psychisch en fysiek herstel van zowat 2000 meisjes en jonge vrouwen die slachtoffer zijn van de oorlog in Oeganda. Sister Rosemary Nirumbe is director of St. Monica Girls' School in Gulu, Uganda. She gives shelter, provides education to girls and young women who are war victims. Many of them had been child soldiers, kidnapped, raped, tortured, and forced to murder by Joseph Kony's notorious rebel army. They all witnessed unimaginable cruelty and horror. Sister Rosemary's work has been recognized with honorary doctorates by 3 other American universities. In 2007, she was named CNN Hero of the Year. And in 2014, Time magazine listed her as one of the 100 most influential people. En nu komt er dus voor zuster Rosemary een Leuvense kers op de eredoctoraatstaart. Studentenvertegenwoordiger Arjan Keizer introduceert zuster Rosemary Nirumbe en haar werk.
Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, dear professors, ladies and gentlemen, and last but certainly not least, dear students. Today, I would like to invite all of you to think about hope. Hope. A deceptively simple topic at first glance, but one that has nonetheless divided opinion throughout history. Usually, the debate revolves around the exact nature of hope. Is our ability as human beings to experience hope a blessing? Or is it something rather more sinister? A proponent of the latter, more pessimistic view, was Friedrich Nietzsche. The eminent philosopher saw hope as the greatest of all evils, because, according to him, it prolonged humanity's suffering unnecessarily. Humanity's best interest would therefore be served by abandoning hope. We would abandon hope so that we could focus our efforts on facing the challenges of the present. The appeal of this dim view of hope is rather apparent. It neatly shifts away the blame from us and provides us with a convenient excuse for our frequent inability to live up to the lofty aspirations that hope brings along with it. It is, however, a fundamental mistake to acquiesce to this view, for it can only inspire defeatism. Ironically, therefore, the abandonment of hope leads to the very inability to deal with the challenges of the present that it set out to prevent. It should therefore be clear that we must defend hope at all costs. In order to do that, we must provide the public with strong exemplars, people whose actions are a living testament to the power that hope has to transform society. Today, the students of this proud university would like to use the opportunity presented by our Patron Saints Day to draw your attention to the life and good works of Sister Rosemary Nirumbe, whose achievements are an excellent example of what hope can achieve in this world. When Sister Rosemary started her mission many years ago, she had nothing but hope and the capacity to inspire hope in other people. Her country was being devastated by war, a war that was especially hard on the nation's children, who, as we've already heard, were often pressed into service as child soldiers and who were abused in unspeakable ways. To make matters even worse, those lucky few who managed to survive and escape from their ordeal were often ostracized by society on their return. because society didn't know how to cope with these heavily traumatized survivors. Alone and without a support network to fall back on, most of these children drifted back into the militias from which they had escaped, and thus the cycle of violence remained unbroken. And the abused, or at least those amongst the abused who were able to survive and escape, often turned into abusers themselves. For Sister Rosemary, this state of affairs was unacceptable. She hoped for a better future for these children, a better life, and set about to realize it. With scant resources and little in the way of official support, she had announcements broadcast over the radio. In an interview with Women in the World, she repeated the content of these announcements, and I quote, "I would like you to come here in the situation you are. If you are a mother, come with your child. If you are pregnant, come as you are. And even if you are raped, come as you are." With that simple message of love and acceptance, Sister Rosemary reached out into the world, and she hoped and prayed that the children would listen, that they would understand that despite their suffering, there was still a place for them, that not all had been lost. And thus she inspired hope, hope that brought the children to her. They soon flocked to her, their ever-increasing numbers proving a challenge in its own right. Much of her work in those early years basically came down to trial and error. Without the support of a caring and capable government, Sister Rosemary and her supporters had to figure everything out for themselves: how to feed and shelter these children, how to nurture them back to physical and emotional well-being, and most challenging of all, how to provide a future for them, away from war, away from violence, and away from poverty. And as if all of that wasn't challenging enough already, Sister Rosemary had to do this while receiving death threats from the various warring factions, none of whom were pleased with the fact that she added compassion and hope into a conflict that was so desperately in need of it. But her perseverance and hard work eventually paid off. Today, the St. Monica Girls' School and the Suing Hope Foundation provide refuge to hundreds, mostly female, survivors of the war's worst atrocities. Through education and the fostering of social ties, these children are given a new lease on life. Under Sister Rosemary's tutelage, the girls are integrated into their community and taught invaluable skills, which will help them reclaim the future that was once so cruelly stolen from them. We can learn a lot from the ordeals of Sister Rosemary and her chargers. In her altruistic drive to improve the life of others, we catch a glimpse of an essential truth, namely that hope is nothing less than the projection of love into the future. And it is that love that will always make the difference. Om al deze redenen, mijn heer de rector, verzoek ik u op voordracht van de Academische Raad om het eredoctoraat van de KU Leuven te verlenen aan Zuster Rosemary Nirumbe.
Sister Rosemary Nirumbe, KU Leuven is honoring you for the consolation you offer to all who need it, for the courage, the perseverance, and the humility with which you take care of society's most vulnerable members, for the fact that you prove that hope and love can make the difference, even in the most difficult circumstances, for your unshakable belief in the power of education to make the world a better place. For these reasons, in my capacity as Rector of KU Leuven, and upon the recommendation of the Academic Council, I hereby bestow upon you the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa of this university. My congratulations.
Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, student representatives, what a great honor for me to join you today on this special celebration, especially when you honor our Blessed Mother, who is the patron of this university. From the time I kept on looking at that woman, I found that it is totally something I've been standing for all this time, that is putting a mother and child together. And I want to say, I feel really honored to join this family in this university. The oldest university, the most famous university, and special Catholic university. I am very grateful to the students who managed to get me through their special skills of research. Because I always say, I belong to a place which is so hard to find. I always live in the middle of nowhere. But they managed to get me from northern Uganda to come here today. That means they went across the border, they went across the continent, they went across the cultural diversity. And for this, I want to encourage these students very much to continue doing what they're doing, to look beyond the border, to look beyond their confine, to find exactly what is hidden in the world. When we speak about northern Uganda, as you have said, and we talk about children and women whose rights have been taken away by the rebels of the Lord's Resistance Army, I think many of you would be surprised to hear that Sister Rosemary is standing for child soldiers. And of course, you will say, child soldiers in the ears of everybody are boys. Here, I'm standing for child soldiers who are girls and young women. The Lord's Resistance Army surely took both girls and boys, but girls were more prized because they could be used for dual purposes. They were trained as soldiers, they were used as sex slaves, and at the same time, they had to bear children from these rebels. And after bearing children from these rebels, none of the rebels would claim these children, and these women are stuck with these children. These children belong to nobody. They have no clan. They are not even in the national identity of Uganda as a country. I'm very pleased today to be present in the presence of the ambassador from Uganda and also the nuncio from Uganda. It's a great honor for me to see you here. And I would like to use this platform to bring the voice of the voiceless, the voice of these women, the voice of these children. Nobody is hearing these voices. Nobody is thinking anymore about what can be done next to restore the lives of these girls. Nobody even knows what to do to point to a future of hope, to point to a better future of these women and children. And when I get a platform like this, where I get this great honor, I always take it as a platform for me to bring the voice of these voiceless, to bring exactly the topic which people may not be thinking about anymore. It's true, the war in northern Uganda stopped since 2006, but think of a war which took almost 20 years, robbing the dignity of women and children. How can that be possible that you can rehabilitate these women and children within a short time? It will take a whole generation. It will take a long time. And the work remains for you and me, for all of us who have heard about the plight of these women. The work remains that we need to point to a better future for these young people. We need to help them break that circle of violence. We need them to be a different generation. And we need to let these women know that their dignity is all what they have. And they need to pass exactly the history, the painful history, they need to pass to their children in a special way and say, we break that violence, we break that revenge, we have to forgive and live in future with peace. You need to become promoters of peace. And always, when I speak, I always come to the point where I say, when we know we are able to do something, we reach a point when we all get scared. We say it is too much. When we hear about all the conflicts in Africa, we say it is too much, we can do nothing about it. But you must ask yourself as an individual, what is my contribution in overcoming that conflict? What is my contribution as an individual to pointing to a future of hope, a future which is better for a different generation? And it is all up to you and me to say, from this point onwards, I would like to do something to bring a change in the society. And the change at least must be that every one of us must make an attempt to change the life of one woman, one child at a time. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Meneer Martin Wolf is op zijn minst een opmerkelijke man te noemen. Met ook een opmerkelijke rol binnen de maatschappij. Hij beschrijft het zelf als volgt. I tend to think of my role as something in between a witness, analyzing our societies and its policies, and a prophet, warning my readers. Hij is Chief Economics Commentator van de Financial Times in het Verenigd Koninkrijk. En als opiniemaker wordt hij onder meer gelauwerd omwille van zijn heldere schrijfstijl, het brede spectrum aan thema's dat hij durft aan te snijden en de toonaangevende boeken die hij heeft geschreven over Europa, globalisering, het bankwezen en de financiële crisis. Dissecting the euro crisis, the financing of British universities, the growing opposition to globalization, populism, Brexit, and the politics and economies of China and India, he became an authoritative voice in the debate. He has received numerous journalism awards over the years, and in 2006 he also received honorary doctorates from the University of Nottingham and the London School of Economics. Het laudatio krijgt u en hij van professor André de Koster.
Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. Without fear and without favor. That's the motto of Martin Wolf's current employer, the Financial Times. As a student, however, you don't usually start reading the Financial Times without fear. After all, there are easier things to read. But once you've overcome your initial hesitation, the reading really does come with a favor. Every Wednesday, and on many Fridays as well, you get a piece written by Martin Wolf, Chief Economics Commentator since 1987. Only then do you truly feel that the motto, without fear and without favor, is no idle talk. In addition to his stylistic clarity and the solid underpinning of his reasoning, Martin Wolf's independence and candor are the main reasons he became one of the most authoritative columnists and respected journalists in the world. The keywords to describe the foundation on which this authority is based are critical and independent thinking, erudition, and argumentation. Of course, defending a certain point of view with erudition and argumentation is hardly remarkable for someone who studied at Nuffield College in Oxford and has since then remained in very close contact with academia through his dozens of friends, professors, Nobel Prize winners, or executives of important research institutions. What is remarkable, though, is that Martin Wolf himself also reflects on where the economic models developed by us in the academic world are wrong or inadequate. We cannot overestimate the impact of vulgarizing reflections in which often presumptuous and sometimes ideologically biased academics are encouraged to explore new frontiers. Precisely because it's so difficult to bridge the gap between academic research and the public debate, statements such as the following are of great importance, and I quote, "The financial crisis happened partly because the economic models of the mainstream rendered that outcome ostensibly so unlikely in theory that they ended up making it far more likely in practice." End of the quote. Over the course of 50 years, years that have led him past the World Bank and the Trade Policy Research Center think tank to the Financial Times in 1987, Martin Wolf has adjusted his points of view, at least superficially speaking. He makes no secret of that himself. In his latest book, The Shifts and Shocks, he writes, "Over the subsequent 45 years, I've learned a great deal and, unsurprisingly, changed my mind from time to time." End of the quote. For one thing, he learned that the liberalization of the 70s and the 80s had brought forth a monster, a financial sector able to devour economies from within. Today, economist Martin Wolf is one of the major critics of the banking world. And alongside his belief in a bigger role for the free market, there is now a passionate plea to invest more in public goods and the world's ultimate public good, the climate. Although he has adjusted or abandoned some of his views under the influence of a changing world, the same does not apply to his values. Those are still the same. Or, as Martin puts it himself, and I quote, "It's helpful to separate my opinions about how the world works, which do change, from my values, which have remained unaltered." His values come down to this: liberal democracy, which in his own words is essentially a marriage between market and state, and is incomparably the best way to manage a society. End of the quote. Martin Wolf has often reminded his readers that this is not an economic insight, but rather an intellectual and moral legacy that he cherishes and preserves. He owes it to his two Jewish parents, his father in particular, an Austrian playwright who fled Vienna because of Hitler even before the Second World War, was a passionate defender of liberal democracy because it combined the values of the Enlightenment tempered by, I quote, "the appreciation of the frailties of humanity." His mother, a Jewish woman from the Netherlands, lost dozens of family members in the Shoah. So for Martin Wolf, who was born in 1946, the Nazi horrors have always been a tangible past. This partly explains why, ever since he was a child, he has been very much aware of the totalitarian danger and why he was and is such a fervent opponent of imperialism, fascism, and communism. It's for good reason that he called the implosion of the Soviet Union the most pleasurable surprise of his life. Reflecting about these historical events is also what made him realize early on that an adequate economic policy can stem the tide of detrimental ideologies. When the economy fails, political stability and social harmony are in great danger. In the aftermath of the biggest financial economic crisis since the 30s, this conviction is more relevant than ever. In The Shifts and the Shocks, he wrote, and I quote, "Today, then, the threats to liberal democracy come not from communism, socialism, labor militancy, soaring inflation, or collapses in business profitability, as was the case in the 1970s, but from financial and economic instability, high unemployment, and soaring inequality. The balance needs to be shifted again." End of the quote. As he clearly explained in his lecture last night, he explicitly points the finger at elites around the world for their short-sightedness, which is part of the explanation for the rise of populism, for the electoral success of individuals such as Donald Trump, Marine Le Pen, or Geert Wilders, and for the ruinous break and the spectacular mess that the Brexiteers have brought upon his country, with no knowledge of the complexities. In any case, as a footnote, with Brexit, the EU stands to lose one of its most eminent members. In this populist wave that is engulfing the world today, Martin Wolf is a bastion of reason. With his clear arguments, he exposes demagogues' simple answers to complex questions. Time and time again, he uses his turf knowledge and helicopter view of politics and economics to explain and interpret the impact of certain policy choices on the prosperity of all global citizens. And all the while, he continues to believe that, and this is now my final quote, economics is about far more than prosperity. It is also important if we are to sustain civilization. Once people are deprived of hope of a better life for themselves and their children, societies based on consent are likely to founder. Precisely, Honorable Rector, because this voice is such an enrichment to the public debate, I ask you, on the recommendation of the Academic Council, to confer the honorary doctorate of KU Leuven on Martin Wolf.
Mr. Martin Wolf, KU Leuven is honoring you for your critical and independent mind, which allows you to do justice to the Financial Times motto, without fear and without favor, each and every day. For your thorough use of both traditional and recent insights from economic theory to explain the impact of policy choices on the prosperity of every citizen around the world. For the comprehensive erudition and intellectual depth you display by writing about a broad range of subjects in a nuanced and accessible way. For the deftly chosen arguments, always based on reason, with which you expose populist discourse. For your integrity, meticulous approach, and open mind, which can serve as an example for new generations of journalists. For these reasons, in my capacity as rector of KU Leuven and on the recommendation of the Academic Council, I hereby bestow upon you the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa of this university. My sincere congratulations.
It is, I have to say, really daunting to be the last speaker after such immeasurably distinguished predecessors. So thank you, Honourable Rector, dear promoters, Andre, Bart and Joe, distinguished guests, student representatives, and anyone I should have omitted from that list. This is among the most gratifying honours I've ever received in my life. It is pure recognition, and that matters to me, and I'm sure all the other recipients enormously. That it comes from a great European university, one almost as old as my own, precisely when my foolish country has decided to leave the European Union, makes it far more gratifying. Thank you. Now, I've always considered the proper recipients of honorary degrees from such great universities to be distinguished academics or celebrated political leaders or great benefactors of humanity, such as those who receive this honor today. Indeed, I almost fear for the reputation of the university if it now gives out such a great honor to what in 18th century England, the time of Dr. Samuel Johnson, would have been called a Grub Street hack. I find myself asking Groucho Marx's famous question, should I join a club that would have me as a member? My answer is a resounding yes. You may have made a mistake. I have not. It is a matter of enormous pride to me that this university has recognized my work as an economics commentator in this way. I am particularly pleased that my wife Alison, with whom I have shared all my adult life, is here to witness this happy occasion, as well as other members of my family. I would like to express my great gratitude to the promoters, and particularly Andre. The encomium was truly magnificent, and in all truth, a little excessive. But on occasions of this kind, a strict sense of proportion and veracity is to be deplored. I not only appreciate the encomium, but greatly admire it. I am not at all sure that I deserve this honor, as I've said, but I accept it gladly, and not just on my behalf, but on behalf of my profession. We need academicians. We need distinguished benefactors of humanity, like Sister Rosemary. But I think we also need what I'm trying to do. The idea of a sovereign university dedicated to the disinterested pursuit of knowledge is indeed one of the glories of European civilization, but I always knew that the life of an academic was not for me. In truth, I was never sufficiently willing to focus on one task long enough to hope to be successful in that line of work. The world does need people who do, or at least seek to do, what I seek to do: explain complex ideas to a wider public and make, in my case, economics, part of the policy debate, not just of my own country or yours, but of the world. And I think it is heartening that this university has recognized, not me, but through me, the activity I engage in, the aim of bringing reason and information to the public debate on matters of vital importance to us, not just in our private lives, but as citizens. A discipline such as economics cannot and must not be a preserve of a small number of sophisticated scholars. While decisions are taken in the world on basis of ignorance, prejudice, and errors of elementary logic, this is not what economics is for. It's a social and public discipline. Somehow a bridge has to be built between the discipline itself and the public at large if the insights of the former are to have any useful impact on what happens in the latter. Indeed, the survival of democracy as a way of governing ourselves depends, in my view, in our ability, and not only in this sphere, to make connections between academia and public life, but particularly so in a domain as intensely political as economics. It is my job, and the job of the depressingly few people in the world who try to do what I do, to be a bridge. It is a job that is hard to do, as I've learned over the years, but I have no doubt whatsoever that it matters, and I hope very much that in future it will continue to be performed by talented people in the rapidly changing world of today, and particularly the rapidly changing media world, flooded, as of course we all know, by fake news. I consider this honor then not to be just for me, but for this profession. It is a recognition by this very great university that economic journalism, with all that it can bring to the quality of public life, matters. Recognition of me is recognition of this important truth, and for this reason I am doubly grateful and doubly honored. Gracias vobis ago. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a beautiful ceremony deserves to be concluded with the most beautiful words in the English language. Thank you. I'd like to thank our honorary doctors for their willingness to connect their values and their work with those of KU Leuven. I'm grateful to them for their presence in our midst and for their inspiring words. Obviously, I would also like to thank the nominators who have introduced us to the work of our honorary doctors. Please, a big round of applause for the 4 honorary doctors and for the nominators also. And of course, very important, a word of gratitude also for the many colleagues and staff members who have made this ceremony come together again. Right at the beginning, I told you that we're celebrating today. But let's face it, so far you've been stuck in your chairs. You haven't had anything to eat, let alone had a drink. So that's not very festive, and I, to be honest with you, can use a drink myself by now. But it's about to get better, I promise. You're all invited to join us at the reception in the Jubilee Hall, the other side of the corridor outside here. You can also meet our honorary doctors and the nominators there. So I hope to see you there in large numbers. Thank you for your presence today.
Dames en heren, voor u recht springt, wil ik nog even een paar dingen zeggen. Zoals de rector daarnet al aankondigde, is een echt feest er geen zonder een hapje en een drankje. U werd daarvoor al uitgenodigd. Maar rest mij enkel nog u ook te bedanken. Dank u wel dat u samen met ons deze bijzondere viering wilde bijwonen. Thank you for celebrating with us. Bedankt ook Aram van Ballaert voor de sfeervolle muzikale ondersteuning. And of course, thank you, dear Honorable Doctores Honoris Causa. Thank you for joining us today. And above all, thank you for your inspiring work. On my behalf as well, deeply and sincerely, congratulations to all of you. Mag ik u, dames en heren, dan nog een laatste keer vragen om recht te staan voor de stoet der togati. Ladies and gentlemen, all rise please for the professors. We wachten nog even op Sister Rosemary, die in een inspirerend gesprek verwikkeld is, tot de stoet naar buiten kan vertrekken.